Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe button as we try to build this thing up. The goal by the end of the season is 1,000 subscribers. That's the goal. That's what we're setting it at. It is attainable. It is. Packers Commanders final thoughts video coming your way on a Tuesday. I guess you could be watching this on Wednesday, maybe Thursday morning, afternoon before kickoff. But final thoughts coming dramatically earlier in the week because of the Thursday night affair instead of a Sunday night game, or a Sunday game, I should say, for Green Bay. So they welcome in the 1-0 Commanders, and we have a lot to break down in our final thoughts video. First off, I think it's a very intriguing head coaching matchup. You have Matt LaFleur, you have Dan Quinn, and if you remember, Matt LaFleur worked under Dan Quinn for a couple of years in Atlanta when Quinn was the head coach for the Falcons, and LaFleur served as the quarterback's coach for Atlanta. There was an overlap of 2 years, I think it was there, where they were both in Atlanta at the same time during that stretch of, 5-6 years where Dan Quinn was the head coach for the Falcons, and LaFleur worked under him as the quarterback's coach. 3 head-to-head matchups where Dan Quinn was either head coach or defensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys, while Matt LaFleur has been the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. And point blank, Matt LaFleur he's had the recipe. He has had the pieces of the puzzle. He's been able to crack the code of the Dan Quinn defenses to the tune of Green Bay in those 3 matchups against a Dan Quinn-led defense. Again, one matchup was when Quinn was head coach in Atlanta, the other 2 when he was the DC in Dallas. And Green Bay's offense has put up totals of 30, 31, and 48 points in those 3 matchups. The 48, of course, came in the playoff game against Dallas a couple of years ago, and there was a pick 6 peppered in there by Savage, I believe he's in Jacksonville now, Darnell Savage. But yeah, Green Bay's team scored 30, 31, and 48 in those 3 head-to-head matchups where it was LaFleur as head coach and Dan Quinn either as DC or the head coach. And so Matt LaFleur he's had the blueprint to kind of carve up Dan Quinn's defenses. Doesn't mean that that's going to happen on Thursday night, but we do have the sample size of 3 games, and the results have been pretty damn good for a Matt LaFleur-led offense. And keep in mind, this is kind of just an interesting note that we're all aware of, but I guess I didn't think about it until I was breaking down the head-to-head matchups between LaFleur and Dan Quinn. 2 of those matchups came against Dallas when Dan Quinn was the DC, and, of course, he had Micah Parsons in that playoff matchup a couple years ago, and Micah Parsons, now in Green Bay, is the highest-paid non-quarterback in NFL history. So now he's on the Green Bay side, but Dan Quinn was the DC for Micah Parsons in Dallas for a couple of years there. And we can transition, too, because when I was breaking down the numbers, again, it's Packers Commanders final thoughts. Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciate the support. Goal is 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season. I was looking at Micah Parsons specifically last year because I think looking past last year, Micah Parsons against the Washington Commanders would be kind of foolish because they might still have some offensive linemen who were in the mix while Micah Parsons was in Dallas, but they sure as hell didn't have Jaden Daniels, and last year was year 1 of a new regime with Dan Quinn, the aforementioned Dan Quinn, taking over as head coach, and Jaden Daniels has already proven he's far different, far more superior than some of the quarterbacks that have made their way in and out of the Commanders franchise in the last, I don't know how many years you want to date back. It hasn't worked out for a lot of them, and they appear to have found the franchise pillar in Jaden Daniels. And so I wanted to condense things and see how did Micah Parsons do against Jaden Daniels in the Washington Commanders last year, not Washington before Jaden Daniels 2, 3, 4 years ago. That didn't make sense to me. And my goodness, last year in 2 matchups, folks, 2 matchups between Dallas and Washington. That means Micah Parsons had 2 bites of the apple to go against the then rookie Jaden Daniels. And in those 2 games, this is combined. In 2 games against the Commanders, Micah Parsons had 4.5 sacks, 6 TFLs, 6 quarterback hits. Again, that's in 2 games, Dallas against Washington. Parsons, 4.5 sacks, 6 TFLs, 6 quarterback hits in just 2 games against Washington. And so I'm like, okay, so how does that compare? We have this relatively small sample size of just 1 game this year, right? Washington played the New York Giants in week 1. I think the final score is 21-6. Washington's defense looked phenomenal. Russell Wilson looked horrible. The offensive line for the Giants was not good. We'll get to that in a little bit. And so I wanted to look at the offensive line for Washington. And, I peeked at PFF, Pro Football Focus, first just to see how things graded out. And lo and behold, again, it's just a 1-game sample size, week 1. That's all we can go by for this year. And 3 of Washington's 5 lowest graded players, according to PFF, offensive linemen. So you think of all the players that filtered in and out of that lineup, starters, reserves that played heavy snaps for Washington against the Giants, and 3 of their 5 lowest graded players. And I always say PFF, it's a good measuring stick, a good measuring tool to use for some categories, for a lot of different things, but it's not the gospel. It is not the end-all, be-all, right? But to see that 3 of the 5 lowest graded players in Sunday's contest for Washington were offensive linemen makes you believe, or at least leads you down the path of wondering, Micah Parsons, who will be on a pitch count again, we know that, played 45% of the snaps against the Lions. A lot of those came in garbage time when the game was well out of wraps. His sack happened with 4 minutes left when Green Bay was up 27-6, but it still counts, right? Great hustle play, great energy. Micah Parsons said in his introductory press conference he has one level, it's go, and he showed that on that sack late on Sunday against Jared Goff in Detroit. But you're looking at how things line up, and Micah Parsons against Daniels in this offense last year absolutely feasted. And then you factor in how the offensive line looked against a formidable, pretty good New York Giants defensive front, right? I think when you're talking about the strengths of the Giants heading into the season, a lot of people looked at that defensive front with Abdul Carter, with Thibodeau, with Burns. I'm missing someone, but they have 4 or 5 really good pieces up front there for the Giants. So it's a good defensive front. There's no doubting that. But so is the Packers' defensive front. Even, I'm not going to say Micah Parsons aside, but it's not just Micah Parsons. Like, you look at that game against Detroit, and you look at pressures created. Not just straight quarterback pressures, but quarterback pressures created in week 1. Rashawn Gary had 5. Lucas Van Ness and Devontae Wyatt had 4 apiece. Micah Parsons had 3. Carl Brooks had 2. Edgerrin Cooper and Colby Wooden had 1 apiece. Per Next Gen Stats, that trio that we're wondering, hey, how's this going to play out with Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, and Lucas Van Ness? Because if you remember early on in the offseason, after the draft, after the wave of free agency, everything Goody said, dating all the way back to the scouting combine in February, they were very high on Lucas Van Ness, entering his 3rd year out of Iowa, former number 13 overall pick, and he's had 2 very, very underwhelming seasons. We all know the story, and Goody was high in his praise throughout the offseason of Lucas Van Ness, said they were expecting big things and a big step forward from Lucas Van Ness this year. Jeff Hafley kind of echoed those sentiments throughout the offseason, whether it was OTAs or early in training camp. Van Ness said he thought he was trying to be too much of a perfectionist the first 2 years, and he's trying to just simplify things, clear his head, go out there and just ball. And so this is a huge year for Lucas Van Ness. Number 13 overall pick in his 3rd season, and there's been 2 duds so far. 2 duds of seasons, I should say, in his career. And he looked the part against the Lions. He had a sack. He himself, like I said, he created 4 quarterback pressures. He looked really good. So then you start to wonder, well, Van Ness and Rashawn Gary and Micah Parsons, it's like an embarrassment of riches for Jeff Hafley. Is there a possibility all 3 of those guys could be out on the field at the same time? And if you remember, even before the Micah Parsons trade in training camp, Green Bay Hafley flirted with certain looks in training camp where Rashawn Gary would be on one end, and on the other end, at defensive end, would be Kingsley Enagbari, Bretton Cox Jr., maybe it was Aaron Mosby out there. But then Lucas Van Ness would kick into the inside at defensive tackle. Well, there were 7 snaps. Think about this, okay? I'm going to probably drown you with some numbers, but they're simple to understand. It doesn't take an advanced level of comprehension. And this is per Next Gen Stats. That trio on Sunday of Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, and Lucas Van Ness were on the field at the same time for 7 snaps. Not much, but we're going to ease our way into this. Micah Parsons, like I said, still on a pitch count, didn't even play half the snaps total. In those 7 snaps, where Micah Parsons, Rashawn Gary, and Lucas Van Ness were all on the field at the same time, Detroit had 6 total yards. Not 6 yards a play. 6 total yards in 7 plays when Parsons, Van Ness, and Gary were all out on the field at the same time. And if you go back and watch, most of those instances came with Gary and Parsons on either end, Van Ness on the inside. And that's where Van Ness got his sack of Jared Goff. It was playing on the interior of the defensive front for Jeff Hafley. That's an experiment that I think most, including Hafley, want to see used more perhaps going forward, because once Micah Parsons is cut loose and it's full go and he's out there, 95, 100% of the snap, whatever it is, 90% of the snaps, 85, 90, he's not going to be out there for 100%, even though he probably wants to be. They're going to get, a blow here and there. How often can you incorporate that trio at the same time? Because this is a huge, huge year for Lucas Van Ness, and you kind of got to see what you got in him. And again, week one, I'll say it again, small sample size, one game. Detroit replaced 2 parts of its starting offensive line in the offseason, which is very critical, right, for a Detroit offensive line that was near the top of the league last year across the board. Objectively speaking, Detroit's offensive line was that good. They replaced 2 starters. Lucas Van Ness looked at the part in week one. And how much will we see that trio out on the field at the same time Thursday against Washington? They could have their hands full. Again, just like I won't overreact after one game and say, Lucas Van Ness has figured it out. He's going to be incredible. I'm not going to overreact and say Washington's offensive line is horrible. 3 of their 5 lowest graded players were all on the offensive line against the Giants. But you just start to line things up, and what Green Bay's defensive front looked like against the Lions was so damn good that I don't know how many expected it to be that good, but we expected it to be pretty damn good this year. And so how do they follow this up as an encore against Washington? And I'm very curious to see how many snaps total we see of Van Ness, Gary, and Parsons out on the field on the same time Thursday night, because Washington's O-line is going to be looking across thinking, what the hell are we doing? Like, what's the plan here, plan of attack? There was one play in particular that I found to be pretty symbolic of the impact that Micah Parsons has. Just his mere presence on the field. And this is not an embellishment whatsoever. Detroit had a 3rd and 16 at their own 1-yard line. Maybe it was the 2. I think it was their 2. And it matters because it looked like a loss of 1 on the play maybe. 3rd and 16 from their own 2, right around there. And Detroit comes out in the shotgun. Micah Parsons is out there. Micah Parsons is on one edge, Rashawn Gary on the other. And Detroit just hands it off to Dave Montgomery. They bite the bullet. They're like, we're not going to try to stack up and compound one mistake after another. 3rd and 16 at our own 2. This drive hasn't been working out. The game hasn't been working out. We're going to hand it to David Montgomery, cut our losses, and punt it away unless he rips off a huge run. David Montgomery gets the ball. Colby Wooden is quite literally almost there to just take the ball out of Goff's hands before he even gives it to Montgomery. Like, David Montgomery had no shot. The play had no shot. Colby Wooden's just right there like, hey, how's it going? Boom. Brings down Montgomery at the 1-yard line. It's 4th and 17. Here comes the punt unit for Detroit. And I'm thinking, like, holy crap, someone missed an assignment. Someone missed an assignment. What happened on this play? Because, hey, instinctual play by Colby Wooden. He didn't overthink it. He didn't overreact. It's just, I'm right here, and I'm going to tackle you. And it was snap of a finger. That play was blown up. Go back and you watch the all-22 of what happened. Well, the right tackle and the right guard for Detroit, immediately upon the snap, boom, both went to Parsons. The center went over and gave a little bit of attention to Parsons before trying to move a little bit farther down the field. That left Colby Wooden completely unblocked. That showed the impact of Micah Parsons. Detroit's like, we've got 2, our tackle, right tackle and our right guard. We're double-teaming Micah Parsons here. 3rd and 16 at our own 2, coming out of the gun, we're running the ball. The center also gave Micah Parsons a little bit of attention, veering that direction right upon the snap of the football. And it just left Colby Wooden. The door was wide open. He had to make, for Colby Wooden, a pretty simple play, and he made that play. But it shows the impact of Micah Parsons. And so you have him out there Thursday, and if you have him out there with any combination up front, but specifically I want to see that Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, and Micah Parsons trio, Washington's looking around like, what's the solution here? We can double-team Parsons, but we need eyeballs on Rashawn Gary. We can double-team Parsons, but Lucas Van Ness is lining up on the interior. This worked very well for them week 1 against Detroit. 7 plays with those 3 out on the field with Van Ness on the interior. Detroit had 6 total yards combined on those 7 plays. And so I think it's a spot of luxury to be in right now for defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. Flip side of that, Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Packers, Commanders, final thoughts. Thursday night, week 2, between Green Bay and Washington. Flip side of that, if you're a Washington Commanders fan, that defensive front, I would say on the interior, that's no joke. Like, the Commanders can get after it, and they generated, per PFF, 24 total pressures combined amongst that group. 24 total pressures against Russell Wilson in the New York Giants on Sunday. And I know what the first instinct will be. One of my buddies is a Commanders fan, and we were texting about it, and he was saying, the Commanders' defensive front, he likes them. And he was noting to me, like, Packers' offensive line's pretty damn good, though. Like, the Packers' offensive line is obviously far better than what the New York Giants bring to the table. And really, offensive line has been a problem for the Giants for years and years and years. I noted to him, and, you know, he's a Commanders fan. He doesn't follow the Packers through and through, so it's not a surprise that Commanders fans wouldn't know this necessarily. Aaron Banks, Green Bay's, that's their prized free agent acquisition, he and Nate Hobbs. They backed up a Brinks truck to bring in Aaron Banks to be the starting left guard, and you had Elton Jenkins, all-pro caliber left guard, kick into center. That's how highly they think of Aaron Banks. That's how highly they think of Elton Jenkins, that they think he can make that position change at this point in his career, going from left guard to center. But Green Bay backs up a Brinks truck for Aaron Banks this offseason. That is your starting left guard. That is one of your best offensive linemen. And then probably your best, right tackle Zach Tom. Entering a contract year, last year of his rookie deal, no, Green Bay. Big boy extension for Zach Tom, and a well-deserved, well-earned big boy extension for Zach Tom. Well, Aaron Banks left the game on Sunday against Detroit with an ankle injury. He showed up they didn't practice officially on Monday, but he showed up on the estimated injury report. Banks did with an ankle and groin injury, and the estimate said he would have been a DNP, did not participate. The same goes for Zach Tom. Left that game Sunday against Detroit with a hip injury. On Monday's estimate, showed up as a DNP. Now, I have to find this. Jordan Love, I'm recording this on Tuesday, publishing it on Tuesday. Jordan Love was asked about the O-line and these injuries because you're talking about two of the heavy hitters, right? They all are, but Aaron Banks and Zach Tom, your two highest paid offensive linemen. And Jordan Love said, and I quote, this is earlier on Tuesday, when asked about the offensive line, we may have some guys out there who haven't been out there. So it's one of those things where you've just got to adjust on the fly. I've got confidence in them that they'll be able to go out there and do their job and execute at a high level. But Jordan Love, not really beating around the bush, pretty much saying, yeah, it's a quick turnaround. If this game were on Sunday, probably better odds that Banks and or Zach Tom are out there, but that's not the case. You just played late window Sunday afternoon. Now you're playing Thursday night. I haven't seen the injury report, press conferences on Tuesday as I'm recording this from LaFleur or Hafley, Stenovich, any of those guys, but specifically LaFleur because he can address the injuries with the offensive line. I would be surprised if either Banks or Zach Tom are out there. And so you look at, okay, what does that look like for Washington's defensive front? What does this look like for the Packers' offensive line if those two miss the game on Thursday night? Well, you had Jordan Morgan slot in. He played a little bit of right guard on Sunday, and they did that last year before Jordan Morgan had a season-ending injury as a rookie. He played a little bit of right guard, kind of shuffled in for Sean Ryan a little bit, and then he played left guard when Aaron Banks exited the game, and it was Darian Kennard, who came in for Zach Tom. Remember, they just traded for him from Philadelphia right at the end of the offseason because it seemed like Goody and LaFleur and the rest of the brain trust kind of looked around the offensive line, and they're like, do we really know what we have outside of our top six guys? Like maybe seven of it. Like they didn't really trust the depth. And Travis Glover was put on season-ending IR. Jacob Monk is starting the season on IR, designated to return. That's two depth pieces that absolutely would have been on the roster. So Green Bay looked around, and they trade for Kennard, and he slotted in at right tackle. And I was looking at pressures allowed by Green Bay's offensive line against Detroit. Rasheed Walker, Elton Jenkins, the reason I bring them up, they both played 100% of the snaps. Rasheed Walker, your left tackle, Elton Jenkins, your center against Detroit. And remember, Rasheed Walker, his main priority for a lot of that game on Sunday was slowing down Aiden Hutchinson, and for the most part, Aiden Hutchinson was a no factor. Rasheed Walker and Elton Jenkins played 100% of the snaps on Sunday and allowed a combined 2 quarterback pressures. I should say both of them were allowed by Rasheed Walker. So Elton Jenkins did not allow a quarterback pressure. Kennard played sparingly when he came in for the injured Zach Tom. He allowed a quarterback pressure. Morgan came in late at left guard. Once Banks went out, he allowed a quarterback pressure at left guard. And so it's just one apiece, but again, they weren't out there for even half of the snaps, not even close to that. And so you wonder with this defensive front for Washington that generated 24 total pressures against the Giants on Sunday, it could be an advantageous spot for Washington's defensive front. I thought I had the number somewhere on it was Kinlaw, Javon Kinlaw. He was awesome. I'm going to have to find those, though, because I was looking at their numbers specifically against the Giants and Kinlaw, and it was Eddie Goldman, who both came over in the offseason to Washington. Here it is. Kinlaw in his debut for the Commanders. 4 tackles, 2 TFLs, 2 quarterback pressures, 1 quarterback hit. Team high PFF grade, not defensive high, team high PFF grade of 89.7 for Javon Kinlaw, part of that defensive front on the interior for Washington. Give me a second here. I'm going to find Eddie Goldman too, because I noticed he had a good game too. Eddie Goldman was again, PFF, not the gospel. He was their 3rd highest graded overall player, not just defense. Eddie Goldman had a PFF grade of 84.0 against Washington, or against New York, and their top 3 graded players were all defense. 2 on the defensive front, and then safety Will Harris had a grade of 84.1 for the Commanders. So it's no joke. They can generate pressure. They can get after the opposing quarterback. And Green Bay's pass protection was top tier. It was phenomenal against Detroit. Clean pocket all day for Jordan Love for the most part. It felt like he was hardly even breathed on by Detroit, hardly even touched, right? But now you're talking about a scenario where it's a pretty damn good defensive line for Washington. But the main factor here is if you're without Aaron Banks, your starting left guard, if you're without your best offensive lineman and right tackle, Zach Tom, what does that now look like against, a good Washington front? And so if Banks was healthy and out there, if Tom was healthy and out there on Thursday night, I'd lean towards the side of thinking, hey, Green Bay's probably going to have their hands full a little bit, but I trust this offensive line. Look at what they did in pass pro against Detroit. Look at what they did in clearing some running lanes in the second half specifically for Josh Jacobs. What was it it was like 13 carries for 58 yards in the second half and a touchdown that made it a 3-possession game late. And so they helped pave holes in the ground game for Josh Jacobs to find some lanes. But missing not 1 but 2 starters potentially, and I think likely in this game Thursday night against a Washington defensive line that's going to be coming in with some good juju, some good momentum. I'm looking at this and thinking, man, I feel really good about Green Bay's chances up front when their defense is on the field. But if I'm Washington, I'm looking at, like I'm a shark in the water, swimming around, hunting the prey, seeing that, hey, Banks is probably out, Zach Tom's probably out. So we'll have to see how that looks for Green Bay. A couple other notes to hit on. I don't know how this factors in. I just found it in my, nerding out phase of putting together the layout for this Final Thoughts video. We all know it's 3rd year in a row. Well, we all know if you're a Packers fan watching this. Welcome to Washington Commanders fans watching this. I know this is a Packers-centric channel. Just click the subscribe button. It doesn't hurt, right? 3rd year in a row, Packers have the youngest roster in the NFL. Average age on the team is 25.2 years old. Washington is not only on the opposite side, they're on the complete opposite side. Washington Commanders have the oldest roster in the NFL. Average age is 28.1 years old. Here's why it makes sense for both sides. When I thought about those numbers, I digested them, thought about what it meant, why it is the way it is. Green Bay has already given Jordan Love a massive contract extension. Then they trade for Micah Parsons. Green Bay's always been draft and develop, draft and develop, draft and develop. That's one of the core principles of the Green Bay Packers. Draft, develop, draft, develop, draft, develop. Keep your own guys, all under the same roof. Happy as can be, kumbaya, and then once they hit 30, get the hell out of here. That's pretty much the Green Bay way. There's even more emphasis on that draft, develop now because the salary cap space or lack thereof is heavily chewed up by the contracts of Jordan Love and Micah Parsons. Meanwhile, after 1 year, Washington knows, we've got our guy, Jaden Daniels, franchise quarterback, and it's hard to imagine that there was an entire season that went by and that would just be a 1-year fluke for Jaden Daniels. As a rookie, led the Commanders to the NFC Championship with both his arm and his legs. Composed rookie. You ever watch Jaden Daniels play and just look at his face? Like, that dude's out there having fun. He ever look rattled? He ever look like the moment's too big last year? Even when they got it handed to him. They got whooped up on by Philadelphia in the NFC Championship game. Jaden Daniels is a cool customer. So Washington, after 1 year, saw, we've got our guy at quarterback, the most important position. You have to hit at quarterback. And if you don't, you have to keep trying until you find the guy. And so Washington's looking around and they're like, okay, we've hit on our quarterback and he's on a rookie deal. So let's give Terry McLaurin that extension in the offseason after, it seemed a little bit contentious and a little bit back and forth. But Terry McLaurin got the deal, right? He got the extension worked out. Let's trade for Deebo Samuel. Add him to the offense. Another weapon, another puzzle piece for Jaden Daniels. Let's trade for Laramie Tunsil, who, by the way, outside of a viral play at the end of the first half, where I don't know what Tunsil was doing or what he was expecting. I don't know if you saw the play. I'm sure Commanders fans who are watching this did. Like Abdul Carter just basically, walked by Laramie Tunsil, got right in the face of Jaden Daniels. And then it was weird because Abdul Carter stopped his pursuit of Daniels and it looked like he was closing out on the 3-point line. Quite literally, it looked like he was playing basketball closing out. Daniels threw it away. There was an intentional grounding. It was one of the few errors that Jaden Daniels made in the game. I think there was a little bit of rust that he needed to shake off early, but the numbers were fine for Jaden Daniels. But it was a bizarre play. But outside of that, if you watched that one play in a microscope, right, on Twitter, you might think oh, wow, Laramie Tunsil had quite the afternoon. He was pretty good. Laramie Tunsil was really good outside of that one play that went viral. That's why you can't watch one viral play from an NFL game and come to a concrete conclusion on anything. Laramie Tunsil was pretty good, pretty damn good. And then you think okay, well, he got traded to Washington from Houston in the offseason. Did you see C.J. Stroud? What was one of the biggest issues with the Houston Texans last year? It was protecting C.J. Stroud, who took a pretty big step back rookie year to year 1 to year 2. Not all Stroud's fault. He was constantly under duress last year behind a pretty poor offensive line. And then they traded Laramie Tunsil. And if you watched, and I did, that Texans-Rams game on Sunday, C.J. Stroud was harassed by the Rams defense early and often. And so it was a puzzling trade at the time because Laramie Tunsil was pretty damn good. And now here's a pillar piece, a tackle for our young quarterback, Jaden Daniels. And so I looked at, Washington has literally the oldest roster. Packers have the youngest roster. Why is that? Well, the Packers do the draft develop, they just 3 years in a row. This isn't something new for Green Bay. 3rd year in a row, they've had the youngest roster in the NFL. Washington, why do they have the oldest roster? They have a young quarterback. They hit at the quarterback position on a rookie deal. They're building veteran, proven commodity, proven pieces around him to try to win right now. Before in a few years, they have to back up their own Brinks truck to pay Jaden Daniels, and then it gets a lot harder to add, proven commodities, veteran pieces, things of that nature with the salary cap situation. So it made sense to me from that perspective. Packers, by the way, this is just a fun note. The Packers have 3 players, folks. Think about this. Packers have 3 players on their roster that are 29 years old or older. Not many. 3 total. 29 years old or older. They have 3 such players. The Commanders have 25. There's a lot of experience on this Washington side. And then the last thing I want to finish up with, Mitch, I'm on YouTube. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Always appreciative of all the support. I don't think it buried the lead necessarily because I do think the huge matchup in this one is going to be that Washington offensive line against the Packers defensive front, and then the fun notes with the LaFleur, Dan Quinn history and head-to-head matchup. But you got to talk more about Jaden Daniels and defending Jaden Daniels. Again, I thought he looked just a tad rusty early on, but that's a good Giants defense. You talk about their strengths, and I mentioned it's their defensive front, but it should be a pretty good defense for New York. And then you look at some of Daniels' just base numbers without really diving into the data. If you're considered a bit rusty in week 1 and you're still 19 for 30 for 233 yards and a touchdown, 11 rushes for 68 yards, you're probably pretty damn good. If Rusty as a quarterback is 11 rushes, 68 yards, 230 passing yards and a touchdown, and no critical mistakes, no critical errors outside of the little road bump at the end of the first half where he threw it out of the back of the end zone. It was intentional grounding. It wiped away the rest of the clock. And as good as I believe this Packers defense is, and I think they can be pretty damn good, you somewhat have to accept and then expect Jaden Daniels to make some plays on Thursday night. It's hard to keep a quarterback who's cut from that cloth under wraps for a full 60 minutes. It just is. He already has shown he's too damn good, in my opinion. And so Jaden Daniels is going to make some plays on Thursday night. I think defending him against the run is the one key thing for the Packers. And Jeff Hafley's defense did a terrific job in 2024 against true dual threat quarterbacks. Not quarterbacks who, hey, they can make a play here and there with their legs. True dual threat quarterbacks. Jeff Hafley's defense did a tremendous job last year of keeping them in the pocket and setting the edge. And I went back and looked at some of the numbers. Jalen Hurts week 1 in Brazil. That's a true dual threat quarterback. Week 1 in Brazil last year, Jalen Hurts had 13 rushes. So you're thinking, how many yards did he have on 13 rushes? 33. 13 rushes, 33 yards. He tried over and over again, and Philly won that game at the end of it, week 1 last year. But 13 rushes for 33 yards. Very next week, Anthony Richardson, true dual threat quarterback. In fact, might be better with his legs than his arm, right? And he's the backup. He's QB2 behind Daniel Jones now. But last year, week 2, it was Anthony Richardson coming to Lambeau Field. 4 carries, 37 yards. Green Bay said, no. Jalen Hurts had 13 rushes, and that's way too many, but we held him to 33 yards. You only had 4 rushes. Green Bay's main objective was just make this dude, if you're going to lose, make him beat you with his arm. And Green Bay won that game, and it was because they forced Anthony Richardson to try to beat the Packers with his arm, and he couldn't do it. And later on in the season, Kyler Murray, a true dual threat, 7 carries, 14 yards. Pretty damn good. There is a little bit of a give and take. In those games, like Green Bay did a great job of setting the edge, not allowing the mobile quarterbacks to shred them with their legs. And I do believe it's imperative to do that again on Thursday against Daniels. The drawback in those games, if you go back and look, is the Packers really, really struggled to generate quarterback pressure and sacks, quarterback hits, all those categories. So you have to find that balance. And I know one thing Goody talked about all offseason is the Packers need to be able to get pressure on the quarterback by bringing just 4, because last year Green Bay, only one team blitzed less than the Green Bay Packers. They were 31st in blitz percentage. You bring in Micah Parsons, that solves a lot of those questions that may exist about, can we get after an opposing quarterback consistently by rushing forward? Well, now you have Micah Parsons. One player truly solves a lot of that. So you have to find that balance in this matchup specifically, because to me, Jaden Daniels, when he extends plays, when he can roam outside the pocket, that's when he becomes really, really lethal. He's a very good pocket passer, but in this sort of pick your roadmap, pick your poison scenario, you want to force him to remain in the pocket and just beat you with his arm, which he can do. But the last thing you can allow to happen on Thursday is for Jaden Daniels to get outside the pocket, get comfortable. Some of those plays that break down is when he's at his best, that little bit of backyard football style, and he will beat you with his legs if he needs to. He had 11 rushes for 68 yards against the Giants, and they will have designed runs for Jaden Daniels, but it's those passing plays where a play breaks down and he can extend outside the pocket and look for a Deebo Samuel, look for a Zach Ertz, look for a Scary Terry, or just say, there's 9 yards in front of me at least. Maybe I can turn that 9 to 13 or 14 and keep things moving. And so it is imperative for the Packers to keep him within the pocket on Thursday night, but also you have to find that balance of setting the edge to make sure he doesn't beat you, but also finding those spots where you're bringing 4. And you're like, we're gonna force the issue here and trust that our defensive front will hit home before he gets outside the pocket. You want to have a chance to extend a play because Rashawn Gary or Lucas Van Ness or Kingsley Enagbari or Micah Parsons, Devontae Wyatt, Carl Brooks, the list goes on and on before those guys hit home. And so I think defending Jaden Daniels, it's at times you might feel like you're walking on eggshells. And again, he's going to make plays on Thursday night. He's pretty damn good, right? And he's got pieces around him. You have to limit what he does with his legs because it can open up so much more. And then you're really focusing in on that, and then he'll shred you with his arm. So try to keep him contained in the pocket, but you have to find the balance of setting the edge, but also trying to hit home with some quarterback pressure yourself. So it's tough. Jaden Daniels is a damn good quarterback. Let me know what you guys and gals think. It is Mitch. I'm on YouTube again. Always appreciate all the support. Please take the 2 seconds it takes to just click the subscribe button. And then you won't have to hear me say it so many times in these videos. 1,000 is the goal by the end of the season. It's attainable. We will get there. Packers Commanders Thursday night. This has been Final Thoughts. We'll see you next time.